The tragedy of the Meridian introduction. The sea is not just water, it is memory. It holds what we have forgotten: faces, voices, ships, and tragedies. The Meridian was an ordinary cargo vessel setting out on a routine voyage. But for its crew, this journey became their last. Mysterious silence, frozen waves, voices echoing through the ventilation shafts, and a map that changed on its own. All of it marked the beginning of a nightmare from which no one could wake. This is not just a story of a shipwreck. It is a descent into memory, fear, and time itself. The crew of the Meridian found themselves trapped in a closed loop, where reality fades and the only way out is to remember the truth. But can a human soul bear the weight of memories that the sea itself refuses to forget? The tragedy of the Meridian is the chronicle of a lost ship that tried to escape and vanished, leaving behind only a wave, a splintered crate, and this story. Novel outline: The Meridian's Shadow, 15 chapters. 1. The Curse of the Meridian. A mysterious legend surrounds the old ship Meridian, which once vanished without a trace. A new crew prepares for a routine voyage across the Atlantic. 2. Captain Elias Gray. Introduction of the captain, charismatic, but haunted by a dark past. He's plagued by disturbing dreams. 3. The Strange Map. One of the crew members discovers an old map with a marked closed route, not found on any modern charts. 4. Departure. The ship leaves port. Everything seems calm, yet a strange tension hangs in the air. One camera keeps glitching. 5. Calm and whispers in the night. A sudden and unnatural calm settles over the ocean. At night, the crew begins hearing whispers and children's laughter through the ventilation. 6. Disappearance. One sailor vanishes without a trace. Surveillance footage shows him simply disappearing. 7. A storm from a clear sky. A violent storm hits despite cloudless skies. Instruments fail and the strange laughter grows louder. 8. Echoes of the past. Gray finds an old logbook in his cabin. It belonged to his grandfather, former captain of the original Meridian, who vanished decades ago. The entries describe current events. 9. Ghosts from the deep figures begin to appear in the water. Some claim to recognize the faces of lost sailors almost or even their own. 10. SOS signal. A distress signal is received from coordinates where Meridian disappeared years ago. The message loops endlessly. 11. The ghost ship. The crew encounters another vessel and completely deserted, its name Meridian. Inside, they find familiar belongings. Their own. 12th. Mirror reflection. They realize the truth that they are the lost crew, trapped in a repeating time loop. This is not the first cycle. 13. Mutiny panic spreads. Some of the crew want to break through, others want to turn back. Mutiny erupts. Gray is no longer trusted. 14. The sacrifice. Gray understands the only way to break the cycle is through sacrifice. He throws himself into the sea. But something changes this time. 15. Rescue and horror. The crew is rescued, but rescuers recognize their faces. They match sailors lost decades ago. And the ship's name on the hull? The Meridian's Shadow. The documents are old. The cycle seems broken, but for how long? Chapter 1. The Curse of the Meridian. In the Bay of Halifax, lost among mists and memories, stood a ship so steeped in silence that even the oldest fishermen refused to speak its name. Its name, Meridian, had long since been worn away from the hull by time, but not from the memory of the sea. Every evening, an old docker known only as Hook would sit on his crate, puffing on his pipe, and murmur the same phrase under his breath: "When the Meridian sails again, the sea will take its due." Newcomers laughed, but the locals avoided even glancing at the ship. Not out of fear, but because they knew it remembers. The deck's wood still held the echo of footsteps from the crew that vanished without a trace nearly 30 years ago. Back then, the Meridian set off with cargo and 12 souls aboard. No signals, no wreckage, only a bottle spat back by the waves, holding a battered logbook with one single phrase blurred by salt. We are no longer us. When the ship's owner announced the Meridian was being readied for a new voyage, the town fell silent. Only one man stepped forward to volunteer as captain, Elias Gray. His eyes were dark as rusted sea, and his face looked carved from stone. He said nothing during the first meeting with the crew. He only ran his hand along the railing, fingers pausing on a cracked section of the wood, as if searching for something, or remembering someone. "We sail in a week," he said flatly. "And if any of you fear ghosts, I better run now." No one left. They didn't know it yet, but they had already made their final choice. Chapter 2. Captain Elias Gray. Elias Gray was what they called a sea wolf. Not for his beard or the way he spoke, but for his eyes. They never sparkled. They burned darkly like lanterns on a sunken ship. He had no family, no friends. Everyone who had ever served with him was either dead or refused to speak. Rumors about his past drifted like wind over water. Some claimed he was the sole survivor of the Amalthea trawler that sank near Iceland, supposedly pulled from the icy waters after 3 days and never uttering a word about the storm or the crew. Others believed Gray had single-handedly put down a mutiny on a tanker, leaving behind only shadows of the men who defied him. But no proof existed. The captain never spoke. The day before departure, he stepped into his captain's cabin aboard the Meridian. A dark, cramped space with deep cupboards, an old writing desk, and a heavy portrait of the ship on the wall. There, at the bottom of a trunk, he kept a bundle of yellowed letters. They were from his father. The last one was dated April 2nd, 1995. "Elias, if I don't return, don't look for me. But if you ever find the Meridian, destroy it. It's cursed. It knows what we did." The captain read those words every evening, and each time he burned one of the pages in a brass ashtray. Only the final letter remained. That night he didn't sleep. He listened to the creaking of the hull like a whisper. Somewhere beyond the wall, the ship was breathing. Deep, heavy, as if it were waking up. And when, at 4:43 a.m., a deckhand named Collins stepped onto the deck, he saw the captain standing barefoot in the center of the ship, staring up at the sky, whispering softly, "This time, I will make it." Chapter 3. The Strange Map. The day before departure proved restless. Though the sky was clear, a heavy, sticky silence hung over the harbor, as if the very air awaited something inevitable. The crew busied themselves with loading equipment, but a quiet unease spread among the sailors, one that even the light sea breeze couldn't dispel. A skinny boy with dark, curly hair, cabin boy Nathan Collins, had been tasked with organizing the old hold below deck, where ropes, tarps, and outdated equipment were kept. With a sigh and a lantern in hand, he reluctantly descended. Beneath a thick layer of dust and cobwebs, he stumbled upon an iron-bound chest, its emblem long since worn away. There was no lock, only nails that yielded easily under the pry of a crowbar. Inside there was just one item, a map rolled into a tube and made of coarse parchment, as if from the age of discovery. Nathan spread it out on a crate. It was difficult to read. The markings were drawn in a dark red ink, nearly brown. Most curious of all, a section of the Atlantic was outlined in the shape of a spiral. At its very center stood a single word, jaggedly written, "The Gate." Above the drawing, someone had scribbled, Not the straight path leads to truth, but the one that sinks into oblivion. Collins brought the map to the captain. Gray glanced at it, and for the first time his expression changed. Without a word, he snatched the map, locked it away in the ship's safe, and said only, "We will not follow this route, ever." No one spoke of the map again, but that night Collins heard the sound of the captain quietly unrolling it in his cabin, and staring, far longer than anyone should stare at paper. And by morning, as the crew raised anchor, one of the sailors noticed the compass bearing had shifted, just slightly, by a few degrees. But now the Meridian was heading straight toward the center of the spiral. Chapter 4. Departure. On June 3rd, precisely at 6 a.m., the Meridian slipped away from the dock like a shadow peeling off the shore. The bay still slumbered in a damp mist, and the sun had only just begun to rise above the horizon, casting a red glow across the water. This day was meant to mark the beginning of an ordinary cargo voyage across the Atlantic. But from the very first minute, something felt wrong. The ship moved with an uncanny smoothness. The sea was unnaturally calm, as if it were holding its breath. On the bridge, the captain steered in silence, never taking his eyes off the horizon. His right hand clutched a compass, his left rested on the helm. From time to time, he glanced at the clock, though its hands had not moved. Seaman John Pratt, an experienced navigator, double-checked their coordinates several times. Everything indicated they were drifting slightly farther south than planned, but the instruments worked fine, and the map, updated by the captain, sat in the chart room. He decided not to argue. When the sea is silent, it's best not to ask questions, Pratt told Collins after the boy quietly mentioned noticing the change in course. The first 2 days passed quietly. Too quietly. Though there were waves, the ship never rocked. It felt as if they were standing still, even though the instruments showed both speed and changing position. At night, no stars were visible, nor the moon, only a solid black curtain, endless and deaf. On the third night, the strange things began. Seaman Larry Sung swore he saw a massive dark shape in the water, swimming parallel to the ship. No one believed him. But before dawn, the second engineer, Garcia, reported he'd nearly fallen overboard, claiming the deck beneath him had shifted like it breathed. But the worst was the radio. Each evening, the radio operator picked up faint signals, fragmented phrases that dissolved into static, like an old gramophone skipping. Only once did he manage to make out something clearly. Meridian accepts itself. The captain forbade any recordings, said it was electromagnetic interference. But the next morning, Collins found an old, rotted life vest in the provisions hold, with the word Meridian in an old typeface no longer in use. He rushed to bring it to the captain, but when he returned, the vest was gone. Only a wet trail remained, leading to a hatch no one had opened. Chapter 5. The calm and the whisper in the night. On the fourth day, the sea stopped. No wind, no waves. The water lay deathly still like a stretched mirror, reflecting the Meridian down to the smallest nail. The air had grown heavy, as if someone else had already breathed it before them. The engines were running, the compass slowly turning, but everyone felt it. They weren't moving at all. "Dead zone," muttered Navigator Pratt. "Or a trap." That evening, the crew gathered in the mess hall earlier than usual. Conversation was scarce. Even the joker, Peter Banks, sat silently, tapping his fingers on the metal table. Someone tried to play music, but it stopped on the first note. The old cassette player froze and began rewinding the tape silently without a sound. And when night fell, it was dense, like a locked door. No light beyond the rail, and in that suffocating silence, they came. The voices. At first faint, barely audible, like radio interference. Then clearer. Someone knocked on the cargo hold walls. Someone called out names. "Nathan! whispered right by Colin's ear as he scrubbed the deck on night shift. He turned. No one. But the mop fell from his hands because he heard it again. His mother's voice. She had been dead for 3 years. At 2:14 a.m., someone knocked on the captain's cabin door. When Gray opened it, the radio operator stood there, pale as a sheet, soaked in sweat. They're talking to me. So many. I heard myself, me, but I was old. Gray silently closed the door and did not open it again until morning. The strangest event happened around 4. Cook Johnson, who rarely left the galley, screamed and ran to the deck with a knife. He kept shouting the same thing. "We've been here. I remember. This kettle, this damn pot. I already scrubbed that grease. I lived this already." They restrained him. He sobbed, begging them not to throw him back into the loop. That same morning, the captain issued an order. No one was to go on deck alone, and most importantly, do not answer the voices. Because as he said, what speaks to you yet doesn't necessarily want to be found? Chapter 6. Disappearance. On the 5th day, Peter Banks was gone. He was assigned the midnight to 2 watch on deck. Collins, who was to relieve him, came up precisely at 2 and found no one. Peter's flashlight lay on the deck, still warm. The strap from his life jacket, torn. No sound, no stain, nothing. Only footprints leading to the very edge of the deck and ending there. "Could he have fallen?" Pratt asked. "Someone helped him fall," Gray replied, eyes fixed on the helm. "Or someone called him." The crew searched the ship 3 times. Disappearance was impossible. No access to lifeboats, no radio signals. The radio operator was silent, sitting in his cabin with headphones on, even when there was no sound in them. By noon, another was gone, Garcia, the second engineer. His last words overheard by the machinist. "You hear that? The engine? It's breathing." He went down into the engine room and never came back. They found only his coveralls neatly folded on a pipe, as if Garcia had simply stepped out of his skin. The captain gathered the crew. "From now on, no one walks alone, nowhere. Don't go topside without permission, and don't look into the water, under any circumstances." "What the hell is going on?" Johnson shouted, still trembling from his breakdown. This is some kind of hell." Gray looked at him calmly. "Worse. This is the sea's memory." He entered his cabin, took the map from the safe, and hesitated for a moment. Then he placed his finger at the center of the spiral. "We're almost there." Everyone exchanged glances. Everyone understood they were no longer going where they had planned, but no one dared to challenge him. That same night, someone woke to voices in the ventilation. Children's laughter, a whisper that echoed as if from the belly of the ship itself. 3 more, 3 more, and then we will open our eyes. We will." Chapter 7. Mirror. Silence. On the 6th day, everything stopped completely. Not in the sense that it went quiet, but in the sense that it disappeared. Sounds, wind, the hum of the engines, even the creaking of the hull, which usually echoed through the lower decks. The silence wasn't outside. It came from within, as if the sea itself had decided to stop being the sea. "We're trapped," Pratt whispered on the bridge. "No waves, no stars, and look, the sky isn't moving anymore." They all looked up. The clouds, which had drifted on the horizon before, now stood frozen, painted in place. Even a gull seen flying nearby an hour ago hung motionless in the air, like a model on a string. And the water, smooth as glass, reflected a different sky. Collins saw it first. He leaned over the railing and froze, because instead of his own reflection, he saw not himself. In the water below, he was an old man. Scarred face, one eye clouded, lips sewn shut with thick black thread. He stared, and the mirrored him slowly smiled. But it wasn't his smile. Collins screamed and collapsed on the deck. They had to pull him away. The captain himself dragged him back. Then he turned to the crew and said only one thing. The water no longer reflects. It remembers. Later, they discovered the ship's clocks had stopped during the night. The navigation systems no longer updated. The radio was silent, but the old clock on the captain's cabin wall had started ticking again. And with each passing second, each tick, came a whisper through the pipes. As if someone unseen, deep within the ship's guts, was counting time with joy. Tick. One more. Tick. Closer. Then Gray gathered the crew in the hold. We have only one thing left, men, to get out of this spiral, and each of you must remember what you've forgotten. What does that even mean? Johnson asked. You've all been here before. All of us. We're not sailing forward, we're sailing back, to the moment when it all began. And if someone remembers too much, they'll disappear. And one of the crew whispered then, We've already disappeared. Chapter 8. The Inner Storm. On the seventh day, the sea finally spoke. Not with waves, for there were none. Not with a storm, for the sky was still frozen. But from inside the ship came a sound like thunder, low, drawn out, like a giant walking somewhere beneath the keel. And with each step, the hull trembled slightly. It's not a storm, Pratt whispered. It's it. The ship began to shudder, though the waters remained dead calm. Not a single drop hit the deck. Only jerks, twitches, as if the Meridian had become a puppet in a child's hand, pretending to play ocean. Everyone gathered in the engine room, the only place with any light. The lamps flickered, but didn't go out. Captain Gray was there, too. Pale, heavy-eyed, the map in his hands. For the first time, he unrolled it in front of everyone. At the center of the spiral, a second word had appeared, as if someone had just written it moments ago. Within. We keep looking for a way out, the captain said, but it's not out there. The exit is inside. Inside one of us, because the one who remembers is the key. Suddenly, Johnson screamed and slammed against the wall. It's me, I remember. I've already died here. In the water, they were pulling me back. They dragged me and then let go, so I would return. He tore free from the crew's hands, bolted to the deck on one end, and leapt overboard. No splash, only silence. And a wave, the first all week, rose up. But not from the sea, from within the ship. Everyone was soaked, but no one heard where the water had come from. Collins, sobbing, stared into the dark hollow where Johnson had vanished. We won't die, right? We'll just stay here? The captain stepped beside him, gripped his shoulder, and, for the first time, Mike spoke gently. We're no longer alive, Nathan. The question is, will we remember why? And at that moment, somewhere deep inside the hull, one of the sealed compartments slowly opened. Everyone heard the creak, long, metallic, like a door in the back of one's memory. It was dark inside, but something was waiting. Chapter 9. Chamber 13. No one remembered that hatch on the lower level of the hull. Not even Pratt, who had served on the Meridian long before Captain Gray. There's no Chamber 13 here, he muttered, staring into the dark opening. We only have 12. Always have. But on the steel door, a black plaque was tarnished. Chamber 13. Entry by captain's permission only. Forgotten access. Gray silently took a flashlight, nodded at Collins and Pratt when they went inside. Metal stairs coated with a thin layer of rust led down to a level that was not supposed to exist. The walls below were unlike the rest of the ship. They weren't metal, more like stone, damp, porous, with shells embedded in the structure. It seemed less like a ship and more like an underwater cave disguised as a vessel. In the center of the chamber stood something like a sarcophagus, but instead of inscriptions, it was covered in countless engraved names, some familiar. Banks, Garcia, Johnson, Collins whispered. Those are the ones who already vanished, Pratt finished. Only look closer. Collins leaned over, and inside the sarcophagus he saw glass. And beneath it someone lay, neither dead nor alive. It was his own face. Shadowed, distorted, but unmistakably himself. Suddenly the sarcophagus trembled, and a voice low and familiar spoke inside all three of their heads. You have returned. At last, you did it again. For the 11th time. Pratt stepped back. What does that mean? Gray stood motionless. His hand trembled. Then he spoke. The Meridian is not a ship. It is a loop, a cycle. We've been caught in it many times. Each time, someone forgets. Someone remembers too much. And then everything begins again. And this time? Collins asked, barely whispering. The captain placed his hand on the sarcophagus. This time, we're close, because Chamber 13 opened by itself. The flashlight beams began to fade, but before everything plunged into darkness again, Collins noticed one more name freshly burned onto the sarcophagus surface, as if scorched from within. Nathan Collins. Chapter 10. The 11th Cycle. After Chamber 13 revealed itself open, everything changed. Captain Gray stood by the sarcophagus as if enchanted, while Collins and Pratt exchanged glances, feeling like mere pawns in a foreign game, a script written long before. The 11th cycle, whispered Gray. We're stuck in a time loop. Each time the ship sails, the story repeats. And in every repeat, someone disappears. Or remembers too much. Collins shifted his gaze to the map. This isn't just a journey, it's a curse that holds us captive. Pratt nodded. And anyone who tries to escape or change the course of events vanishes without a trace. The one who remembers dies. Gray slowly turned to the crew gathered around. The only way to break the cycle is to keep the memory without losing your mind, and understand what triggered this curse. Suddenly, the sail on deck tightened abruptly, and the first true gust of wind swept over the ship. The sea around boiled with waves that had been absent for a whole week. But even amid this movement, everything felt strange, as if the very sea wanted to warn them of something terrible. Gray looked toward the northern horizon, where a dark shadow seemed to appear. There, the beginning. There, the end. Collins took a deep breath. We must find out the truth, even if it costs us our lives. The ship moved forward, and beyond the horizon a dark cloud began to rise. Chapter 11. The Shadow on the Horizon. The dark cloud on the horizon grew with every passing minute, swallowing the sunlight and the colors of the sea. It wasn't an ordinary storm. No, it was something else. Something alive like a sea monster awakening from the depths. The crew stood on deck, watching the shadow slowly approach. The atmosphere grew tense, like everyone felt this was not just a storm, but something unavoidable. This is the moment, Captain Gray said, when the cycle must be broken. Time to face what holds us. The radio operator, who had been silent for so long, lifted his head. I'm receiving a signal, but it's not in our radio frequency. It's a voice. Everyone listened closely. A whisper came through the speakers, the same childish laughter that had echoed from the ventilation ducts since the first days. You thought you could escape. But we are the sea, we are the memory, and this time, you will not vanish without a trace. The wind grew stronger and the waves began rocking the Meridian more violently. The captain addressed the crew. Prepare yourselves. This is the last battle, or the last voyage. Chapter 12. Echoes of the past darkness enveloped the Meridian, but through it pierced memories like ghosts swimming alongside the ship. Each crew member began to hear their own voices, their fears, and the deepest, long-forgotten memories. Gray stood on the bridge staring at the map, which suddenly came alive. The sailing routes lit up brightly, forming a new, unfamiliar path. He realized this was not just a course, but the key to the mystery. We must follow this route. But it leads to the very heart of the sea, Pratt noted, to the place where it all began. Collins, standing nearby, suddenly heard the voice of his father, who had died at sea many years ago. Is this real or just an illusion? He asked himself. The answer was the same for all. To be freed, they had to accept their past and let it go. The ship slowly approached the marked point on the map. Ahead, only the abyss. Chapter 13. The Heart of the Sea. The ship slowly sank into the dark, cold waters where even sunlight could not penetrate. The atmosphere on the Meridian grew heavier, as if the sea itself wanted to swallow them forever. Gray stood on the bridge holding a map that now almost glowed in the darkness, showing the point everyone feared to see, the center of the cycle. This is the heart of the sea, he said, the place where it all began and where it must end. Suddenly the water around the ship began to boil like a living organism, and the lights on the deck flickered faster and faster. The crew felt as if an invisible force was pulling the ship inward. "Hold on!" the captain shouted. "This is the last moment!" Unexpectedly, a huge wave rose, enveloping the Meridian from all sides. And then the impossible happened. Beneath the water surfaced a massive shadow. It was neither a whale nor a shark. It was a vast ancient entity, the very memory of the sea, the spirit that held them in the eternal loop. It lifted a huge fin, and everything around began to dissolve. Chapter 14. The Fall. The ship, like a toy in the claws of a giant creature, spun helplessly in the merciless current. The enormous silhouette of the sea's essence loomed over the Meridian, casting a shadow over the sky like a colossal demon, awakened from centuries of sleep. Gray shouted orders for the crew to hold on tight, but neither engine nor oars could resist what defied the laws of physics. Before everyone's eyes flickered images of the past. Mistakes, fears, unfinished business, which the sea kept as treasures in its dark abyss. Suddenly a figure emerged from the silhouette, yet familiar, yet changed. "You have forgotten who you are," she whispered. "You have forgotten that the sea does not forgive." It was a woman, the same one the captain had met in the early days of the voyage. But now she was no longer just a person. She was the embodiment of the cycle itself. She stretched out her hand and the ship began to break apart. And the last glance. Collins, Pratt, and Gray stood on the deck that was crumbling as the sea swallowed them. And in the final moment, only a quiet whisper was heard. Every cycle is a new beginning. Chapter 15. The Silence. After the storm, the ship vanished into the abyss. No holds, no decks, no crew remained. Only silence reigned over the sea, which had once again become calm and mute. Days and nights passed, yet there was no sign of the Meridian on the horizon. Only one fragment, a weathered wooden box that once lay in the hold, was carried by a wave to the shore. When opened, on the shore they found an old map and Captain Gray's journal, entries that began with an ordinary travel plan and ended with mysterious drawings, coded words, and final lines. "We are neither alive nor dead. We are shadows of the past, forever adrift. The sea takes, but it also gives memory. Will we ever be free? Is there an end to this cycle?" And on the last page was the date, today. The story ended, but the questions remained unanswered. Was this cycle real, or just the sea's nightmare? And would the Meridian ever sail again,